Welcome back, everyone. We are in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma today, and we are going to be discussing digital transformation, something that we are all curious about and trying to understand. Automation's coming, digitization's coming, globalization's coming, and if you get that many azations in a sentence, you get kind of overwhelmed. But there are people who are trying to solve this, and in particular, looking at how it can affect humanity. This is something, as a psychologist, that's near and dear to my heart, and something certainly that we talked a lot about in DoD, not just on behalf of the United States, but also globally, as we think about how people can be affected, how they can be controlled, manipulated, and yet also helped and informed and empowered. And so the question is, how do we thread the needle on this? So if I could turn it to you, tell us who you are and a little bit about you and how you got to where you are today, because you kind of have a unique pathway.
Sure. My name's Matt Stafford, and I'm a consultant at Future Point of View. We're a digital strategy firm here in Oklahoma City. I started out as a newscaster in my previous career. I worked for 6-7 years. I was in Casper, Wyoming for a couple of years, and Colorado Springs for 4 years or so. But moved back home to Oklahoma, and I've been here at Future Point of View the last 6 years. And like you were saying, our focus is on helping companies, bridge that gap between business and technology, and understand not just how to communicate on those things, but understand the balance of what they do, what they're trying to serve for their memberships, their customers, all of that base, and how they do it, both with human touch and with technology, and what the right balance is. You can use all the ization words that you want to. We like to make up words around here too, as well, so you're in a safe space.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
We do have a running joke that once you get a PhD, you're allowed to make up words.
I'm all for it.
Yeah,
Go for it.
And if it goes on a sticky note, then it is definitely, it's reality, and it's surely going to get to a dictionary soon.
Just make sure you got your copyright.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, and speaking of which, you have a nice picture on the wall back here. So tell us, what is humology?
Humology is the blending of humans and technology to do any process. And so, there are pieces to this that require, a very human touch. They require creativity. They require empathy. You need a human looking over certain things. But there are certain things that are more inclined for a machine to do. Machines are reliable. They are scalable. They can process things at speeds that we can't at exact accuracy. They can retain information. And so, the key and where we find businesses are struggling with right now is finding that balance of what are those things that we need to maintain humanity or humans doing, and what are those things that we need to outsource to machines. And it's not about replacing all of the humans in any stretch of the imagination. You need that humanity in there. It's about finding balance, like anything in life.
Yeah, so we were talking a little earlier about that balance, and I think a lot of people assume that everything will be automated. And there's actually a really important reason why it won't be. So talk to us a little bit about what happens when you over-automate.
You get clunky. I mean, it's just the same thing as calling that customer service line that you get the robot instead of the person on the phone, and you're just trying to press 0 to get to the operator, and there's no one there to help you. If you're a business and you're doing that to your customers, you're going to chase them off. If you're a government that is, trying to innovate and to keep ahead, you're not going to keep that same advantage. You're going to slow yourself down and create friction.
Yeah, and in the individuals, the workers that work for you as well, they can become slower and less thinking. We've seen this in cases where we look at maybe flight simulators, and when we over automate, we find that people actually start to check out, and so then they don't fly as well. And so we always have to have that balance. And so sometimes it seems counterintuitive that we'd want to increase the automation, but we actually have to keep them engaged.
We're not in a place right now where we see education still very much in that lens, and I know this is a topic that is big for you, but we still very much see it in the lens of we're going to educate you for a career, and you're going to go work 40 years in this thing, and you'll retire at the end and all will be good. But we're now in a time where you're gonna, we see it already in people changing careers over and over, but it's the adding of skill sets and jumping into new challenges and things like that. And so, as we move forward with this automation, there is a huge responsibility on employers, of all types, public, private, nonprofit, all the like, to find those new skills, find those new talents in their employees that are beneficial in today's world. I've seen a lot of organizations take people who were not data scientists in any stretch of the imagination, but were creative people and were very good at HR or marketing or the real estate division of their company, and really hit it out of the park, doing data visualizations and telling stories with what's happening on the data, and find a whole new role in the organization being that, kind of citizen data scientist, not a full-on data scientist, but they know enough to be dangerous in there. Same thing with like process mapping and project management to help make sure that these massive software projects that a company's trying to put in a new core system and it's costing them millions of dollars and it's going to take a year or two for them to put in. There are people that are finding new roles in, helping the process, get the project get all the way through, but understanding the process fully and playing, business analyst kind of liaison roles between IT and technology that, didn't exist several years ago. I mean, there's always been a little bit of that analysis type role, but these roles are really coming into their own and really blossoming at a lot of organizations. And to me, I see that as a big thing that we're going to have to do to keep people engaged, to keep those skills from declining, like you talk about, and to keep the onus on people to keep moving forward, because there is still an onus on them. We can't pull them forward.
No, we can't, but I think people are afraid.
Yeah, and that's understandable.
To summarize, yeah, and
so we hear that.
I'm sure, and as I've gone around the country, I'm actually in state 45 today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, the honor is really mine. I've gotten to meet so many people around the country, and especially if we get to people who are in a labor space, there is a lot of fear as to what's going to happen and how things are going to change. So I love, as you talk about with great enthusiasm, there's a space for everybody. We just haven't necessarily imagined all of those jobs. So walk me through, if you get into a company and you look around, and I assume, although correct me if I'm wrong, they say we need X. And you say, well, let's look a little further. What do you look for as you kind of assess where a company is as they make this transformation to a digital space?
Well, the typical, we want X is we want X yesterday. And so all of this discovery is on an accelerated timeline. But, there's a lot of pieces to it. And we built out a full digital maturity model that goes across 9 different dimensions of what we think that it means to be digitally mature. That doesn't mean to have the flashiest system in the world with the most blinky lights and the most capability. That is really an ability to see changes and the way that your market is coming, and to be adaptable. And when you do adapt, to fully leverage the technology that you put into place. That's the key in today's environment. You've got to be able to move quickly and adapt when the market changes. And so for us, we want to make sure that leadership has the vision and, frankly, the courage to take on some of these big tasks whenever, it's going to cost a lot of money. It's going to cause some political uprising inside the organization. They're going to have to get a lot of people to collaborate. We want to make sure the culture's right to take on something like that they don't just stick in a new system in a culture that, is going to, immediately have 10% of the workforce retire because they don't want any, change put into it. And another 20% says, I'll push the buttons, but I'm not going to look into the new functionality or all of the modules you're giving me. I'm just going to do what it takes. Their digital plumbing, their systems that they have in place, and how well architected they are, their marketing channels, or just their channels to reach out to their membership or their audience, whatever industry they're in, and where they sit within the market. And that's not all of the dimensions, but we look across all of those areas and we try to score them a little bit of how mature are you in your ability to do X. And once we can look across those different dimensions, we can start to build a playbook of saying, you've got great leadership and your system is not bad. You've got some places where you need to tie data together so you can have more visibility and so you can understand more about your customers and make better decisions. But there's an adaptability piece. And so sometimes it's not about going and buying some brand new system or ripping something out and changing things up. Sometimes it's just about getting the people comfortable with what they have. And to your comment about the worry a second ago, assuaging some of that and helping them through it.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's going to be it. It's going to be a lot of transition, a lot of culture change, and we've got this strange mix. Our age group is kind of in this fulcrum space, right, where the group older than us did not grow up with digital pieces as part of their everyday life, and the group younger than us has never lived without it. And when we have that in the workplace at the same time, it becomes very, very, it's not just difficult, there's a level of friction and anxiety that comes in not only being nervous about what you're taking on, but being compared to someone younger than you that maybe doesn't have your life wisdom, but maybe has some capabilities to work. I mean, we all joke about, the 4-year-old who can use the computer better than we can. And when that's a 30-year-old, well, that changes quite substantially, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Do you see some of that cross-generational
Absolutely.
fear?
And to your point of that scale of the older generations may not have as much experience with technology, where the younger generations are digital natives that have grown up with it. There's another spectrum on the side of that of, the older generations right now are seen as having better soft skills in the workplace and communicating with each other, talking face to face, not on their phones in the middle of meetings, things like that. That the younger generation, a lot of the older generation sees them as lacking. And so, on the human side of that humology balance, there's kind of a flip-flop there as well. And so those two things, I think, in tandem play together in a lot of ways that, I think younger generation gets frustrated at the older generation's lack of technology skills, but the older generation gets frustrated at the lack of soft skills on the younger generation. And so they're just set up for this confrontation right now that we see playing out.
Yeah, but I really like how you're emphasizing the opposite interpretation of, rather than frustration with what the other doesn't have, a buildup of what they do have that could be a complement and benefit to the other, right? And I think if we could get people to that space, we would all function better, which would be great. Tell me a little bit about the think tank that you guys have been running. Now, this has just been the last couple of days, correct?
Yeah.
So this is really recent.
Yeah, it's a 2 or 3 day event. Usually we've done it for the last 6 years. And for us, it's, we're a consulting firm. And so ideas are our lifeblood and what we go around and work with clients. And so for us, it's important to bring in the best and the brightest, top level people at companies that we work with, a lot of them here in Oklahoma, but a lot around the country in all sorts of industries, manufacturing, financial services, staffing, there were all sorts of different industries represented. And we like to pick a topic every year to dive into and work through what we call think sprints. To try to unpack them so that at the end of the think tank they've got a collection of items that they can take back and start implementing in their organization, but it gives us a lot of ideas to work through for the year as well. And so this year's topic was the impact of the impact on humanity, the digital transformation, this time period that we're in right now of immense technology change that it's having on humanity. And we talked about it in a lot of different ways. How is it affecting our business, our customers, our employees, and what do we need to be doing there? But what's it doing to us individually? What's it doing to our family units? And I'm always surprised but not at the same time at the different directions and tangents that our conversations go down. It's always, you get so into the day-to-day with work, it's hard to pull your head up and talk about those things in depth. And I always really appreciate the fact that the ones that do come from out of town, that they'll travel all that way to come spend a few days with our heads up, thinking about where things are heading.
What did you find?
If I was going to sum it all up in a nice tight little sentence or two.
It doesn't have to be. It could be a few themes.
Well, I was a little concerned that maybe there's more. I don't want to say that it's pessimism, but there's a lot of worry. There's a lot of complexity that's coming our way that keeps these people up at night, from everything to, is my company going to be okay 10 years from now, to the next generation I hand it off to what is the impact going to be on my kids or my grandkids, growing up with a cell phone or iPad glued in front of their face. And so I think that while we've never had more of an opportunity to reach out and talk with our customers, we've never had more insight into our data and where, our ability to make good decisions with it. All of these things that technology is giving these organizations, they still slant a little bit on the concerned or a bit pessimistic side. And I think, I'm hopeful that we can protect on the things that we're worried about, whether that's a cybersecurity threat that they're worried about or some sort of brand reputation damage from a data privacy issue, that they can get their house in order on those things and be able to pivot into those opportunities that we have in here. And it's not to say that they aren't taking advantage of opportunities. They're doing it all the time, but the worry keeps people up at night, and it's easier to let that consume your thinking.
Well, it's fair. Mm-hmm. It should concern us, and we should take it seriously because it's too easy to be excited about the possibilities and not necessarily think about how they could be used against us. And that could be against our country, or that could be against us individually. And in some ways, it could be unintended. I was in Washington. I always have to think of what city I was in. I was in D.C. maybe a week or two ago, and I was talking to a young person, maybe 30-ish, who had been a chief of staff for one of the representatives. And he was talking to us about a bill to help first responders have information about the background of the psychological experiences, problems, therapy, drugs, whatever it was that they might have had before going to a 911 call. And he said, well, obviously this would be useful. And we started pushing back and said, well, you could, first of all, bias the person. Second of all, does it have relevancy to what they're actually going to in the call? Third, do they know how to interpret the information that's coming to them? Fourth, how much time is that going to take versus the time they need to be spending focused on taking care of the person? Fifth, are you going to overload their mind when they need all of their capacity to be able to focus here? And this young person says, well, none of that matters because it is always the case that more information is better. And I said, well, there is an enormous amount of research that disagrees with you. And what was fascinating was that we make some of these clean assumptions that there is a benefit to having everything in front of us. But it's also overwhelming. It's also chaotic. And what a body does when it's presented with too much stress, I call it turtling. It does this, right? And so you've actually, in some cases, overwhelmed a person so much that you've created a problem. Multiply that across the entire country, and you end up with every single person going into their own space, or every community insulating themselves. And we even see some of this happening today, and it's that nerves or that chaos. And so I think it's fair that people get concerned. I also hope that we think about it and move forward, because the opposite of that is, wow, what can we say for telehealth, right? What can we do for businesses to be able to make better decisions? What can we do for our warfighters to be able to reduce the onset of PTSD, or to be able to make decisions under stress in even better ways? How about keeping our military home and being able to do non-co-located warfare? There are so many benefits. In fact, I'll share a story. Jacksonville Zoo, one of my very first stop, and we walked into this space, and there's plants everywhere, and there's people everywhere, and then when you look up, you see layers of where animals can come in from different spaces, and they're doing it for emotional wellness. And you know what? They use iPads to be able to allow the animals not only to integrate with ones that are near them, but especially for ones where maybe they have a low number and they need them to procreate, they'll connect them to another zoo that has one, and they have found the animals will communicate. How crazy is that? I said, I'm sorry, what? He goes, we are having higher procreation rates. They are having animals that take their medicine voluntarily. They have calmer, happier, thriving animals instead of ones that are just living. So this can help, but we have to find that balance. So I'm curious, during your think tank time, you probably identified maybe 2 or 3 outcomes or considerations that you'll be looking at over the next year. Were there any of those?
Yeah, and I don't want to make it seem that it was all doom and gloom. There
Oh,
were
sure,
plenty
yeah,
of things
there's lots of
that
stuff.
people were excited about, seeing the advances that we're going to have in healthcare over the
Yeah.
21st century. It will probably make the 20th century pale in comparison.
Yep.
The advancements in logistics to have everything that we need in communities, whether it's water, how we handle sanitation, all of those different pieces.
So agree.
Better managing how people manage their work life and retire and that stage of life. And so there were a lot of things that people were happy with. I think one of the main things that, or at least 1A, 1B that people took away were, on the customer side of things, the journey that their customers go through to engage
like
with
that.
them, it's going to change. And it's going to change repeatedly, over the next several years. And there's going to be some moments of truth that happen in there that you're not going to want to miss, that you'll either create friction if you don't get right for that customer on their journey to you or their member to join your association, whatever it is you do. So you need to be ready to, handle those moments of truth. Let's say you're selling some product and all of a sudden, it's not just Amazon doing the subscribe and save for everybody, but Alexa has a big AI on top of it that's doing all the buying. Well, if you're a company in that space that is selling through there, you're going to have to find a way to get your company to have a relationship with that buying algorithm that's making those decisions. And so little things like that you can't afford to miss in your customer journey as the world changes. And so I think it opened a lot of their thinking to what they're going to have to do to keep that relationship and keep engaging with the customer. But the same thing's true with the employees. They've got a lot of different people in the organization that are going to need to end up in different spaces and evolve skills, pioneer and build new things inside the organization to keep them relevant. And they've got to not only, it's not just about appeasing those people or just keeping them happy with the paycheck. You got to get them invested in what you're doing, and you got to make them a part of the equation. And so you got to identify these people early and help build them into those things that can really drive the company forward. And a lot of that's on the company to identify and have that vision about what that is. And that's why they hire outside experts. It's not, it's not that they don't have great ideas. They do have great ideas, but, same thing with government, like you talked about on the innovating government piece. You need a mix of kind of inside-outside perspective so that you can blend that together and get at a solution that is going to, maybe cover things that you wouldn't have thought of if you had worked within your own walled environment.
Yes, yes. It sounds like agility and creativity is kind of where you've landed. I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Thank you for
Thank you,
stopping.
everybody.